This is a video on my modified 125 Chinese ATV. The reason we bought a Chinese ATV was because my brother wanted a 125 ATV because the 250 was too big for him. It's like a utility ATV, and back then he was too small for it. So we bought him a Chinese ATV because we figured we weren't sure how long he was going to use it for. When he's going to grow out of it. So we bought him that, and then he only used it for like 20 times or whatever for a month, and then it just sat there. No one ever used it, and then one day, 2 years later, my buddy gave me a set of 22-inch ATV tires just for my birthday because he got them for free, and I wasn't sure what I was going to use them for. So then my two buddies came over the next day, and I figured as a joke we'll put them on this 125 ATV because it stock was 18's rear and 17's on the front. So we the rear bolted straight on, no problem. And then the front ones were a little trickier because the bolt pattern was smaller. See, here's the original bolts there and there. And so I had to make up an adapter plate because the bolt pattern was a lot bigger. So I machined up a backing plate for it. And then bored the center out. And then I drilled out holes in that plate in a bolt circle. 8 of them. And then we bolted them right on. They bolted right on, so I took it for a test drive. And then I drove around, and then ended up, the chain kept falling off on the rear because I wasn't sure why it was falling off. So what I ended up doing was, to keep it on, I put a spring-loaded tensioner right on here with a pivot, where is it, to the here, spring-loaded tensioner, and that didn't solve the problem. The chain was still falling off. So I moved the tensioner down to under here. Yeah, but pivot up, where did I put it? Down there. And then that still didn't fix it, so I put a flange on it to try and keep the chain on, but that didn't solve it either. And then one day my dad noticed that the axle looked twisted, looked like it was twisted that way. So I put a straight edge on here and ran it up. It was like 3/4 an inch away from the front sprocket. So what I ended up doing was I slotted out these holes here. The rear were already slotted so I could adjust it. Slotted out those holes, and then I ended up I twisted the axle back into shape, tightened down the top 2 and the bottom 2 bolts up under there, and then that solved the problem until because this Chinese ATV, it vibrates a lot, till it started vibrating, and then it just had the same problem. It came loose, and the chain was falling off. So what I ended up doing was I twisted it back into shape, tightened them all down, and then I just tack welded them, figuring it wouldn't take all that much force to hold it on to the top, to the bottom tacks, and then figured that would hold it. Well, that didn't hold it, it just broke. And then so I put a nice weld on the top, both places, here, and then I couldn't get a very good weld here, and so I just welded it, figured it'd be okay. Ended up, the weld broke, this bracket here twisted, the rear two twisted a little, these 2 side ones twisted a little bit, and I was out in the field, and I couldn't get more than 2 feet without the chain falling off. So I had to run a stick in through here down to that side of the bottom against the chain there to keep it on, and then I made it home. So I tried to pull it back into shape. I put a ratchet strap on here, connected it to a tree, hooked a ratchet strap onto the axle, connected it to another tree, and tried ratcheting it back into place. That didn't work. Ended up I had to cut this weld here, and then I connected the swing arm to the hoist here, and then put the gator on the rear with the winch connected to here so I could pull the winch in and twist the axle back into shape. And then I welded these all up nice and strong, and then the alignment problem was solved. Chain never fell off, and I didn't even need the spring-loaded tensioner until I went and put rubber motor mounts in here to get rid of a lot of vibrations, because it vibrated like crazy at high RPM, even in idle. Because I thought it could have just been the tires, because they're not built for this. The hubs aren't built for these tires, so they'd raise and lower like an inch every rotation. And I thought that might be it until I was revving it in neutral, and then it was really vibrating. So what I did was I pulled this bolt right out, and where is it? That rear, well, behind this cover here, there's a bolt for the rear motor mount. I pulled that bolt out, and then drilled these mounts to 1/2 inch. They were originally 5/16, and then I took a piece of rubber fuel line without the string reinforcing in it, and just put it in there with a washer on it on both sides of the bolt, same with the bottom, and then tightened them down, and that got rid of pretty much all the vibration, which was good. But then the chain was coming off because it was too loose, and what was happening was when I drilled that and put the rubber in it, the rubber was compressing and the motor was coming back too far, and the chain was really loose. Like, I could actually pick it up and just spin it right around on the sprocket. It was so loose. So I put spring-loaded tensioner on it, and that didn't really do much. It fixed it at first, and then it started coming loose. So what I ended up doing was, because after I put the bigger tires on it, I got a higher top speed, except I couldn't reach top speed because the engine didn't have enough power, and didn't have a whole lot of torque in first gear either. So what I did was, I'll show you the original sprocket. This is a 37-tooth sprocket, and so what I did was I took the old chain off, which the old chain was a number 420 chain, and the front's a 13-tooth sprocket. So I took off the old sprocket, and since I figured that chain was really stretched, I put this is a number 40 chain, which is the same pitch. It's just, this is a wider chain, and it still works fine on the front sprocket, as long as I got a wide rear sprocket for it to work. And then it worked fine, because I replaced the sprocket on the rear. I don't know if you can tell the size difference, but it's way bigger. This sprocket, that's a I forget what it is. Oh, that's a 45-tooth sprocket. What it had on it before was a 37. So I ended up with that gear ratio, I ended up with exactly the same RPM as stock and the same amount of torque as stock, which was pretty good before I put bigger tires on it. And then when I put the chain on it and the new sprocket, I figured while I was at it, I'd reinforce the frame, or like the rear swing arm, and because it only had like a 1/4 inch plate along here, and same with the other side and at the rear, and this plate was bending in because that's where the tensioner bolts are. And these here plates were bending because the axle would twist. There's no differential, so there's, with tires being that big, it puts a lot of force on the rear axle. So I welded a 1/4-inch plate onto here, 1/4-inch plate on there, drilled the holes through. Because I slotted it before, that messed it up. So like the axle would be able to twist. So I lined up the axle and drilled those holes so it was all square. And then I went to put the skid plate on there, and it was hitting the sprocket. So what I did was I cut the rear here of this pipe, and then bent it down, so it also bent it sideways so it had enough clearance, and then welded it on there. And then I went and put the bolt through the swing arm there and checked the alignment, and it was way off, like it was really twisted in. And also, when I could twist the whole swing arm, and I had like a 1/4-inch of play up at front, which ended up being like 1 inch here, side to side. And so what I ended up doing was I pulled those bushings off, the original bushings. There's one here and one on the other side. Pulled those bushings out, and they were really worn. Like, either they weren't machined well, or they were just really worn down. Because there was a 1/4-inch of play, I could move it up and down and side to side. 1/4 inch, or no, sorry, 1/8 of an inch. And so what I did with my lathe was I machined up new bushings for it out of just 1-inch bar, and then that stopped the whole rear swing arm from twisting. And then I went and put chain back on and checked the alignment. The alignment was perfect. So I tightened up the chain, tightened the top bolts, tightened the bottom bolts, and drove it around. And then the chain had come loose, so I figured, well, it was just stretching, and so I loosened the top bolts, loosened bottom, tightened up these tensioner bolts, and then tightened all the other bolts. And then it ended up, it had come loose once more, and I figured, well, it's just stretching, because that's it's not a very like high quality chain. It's just cheap chain. And so I tightened it up for the second time, and then after that, it's been fine. I haven't had a single problem with the whole vehicle, actually. And then I spray painted the whole swing arm black, because after I welded it, it was starting to get a little rusty. So then now it runs great. But I also wanted to be able to drive it in deeper water. So I built up a snorkel. What you do is you take off that air filter there, because it doesn't have an air box. Take off the air filter, put it on the end of this piece of rad hose, and the hose goes on the carburetor there, and then it goes up in like that. So I can go in really deep water. And so then I drove it in the pond. I drove it with water like all the way up to here, and I kept driving it through, whatever. And then I got too deep, and the water had ended up, it come up to like the seat almost. And so I went to get off, and I was hopping to try and get off it, and then it tilted sideways, and the air filter took the snorkel got under the water, so it pulled water in, and water's up to my waist, so my iPod in my pocket, it got all wet, so I had to put it in rice for a week, and then that solved it. And it looked like someone had poured milk in the crankcase because there was so much water in there, and the gas tank was originally 3/4 full. And it ended up, no, sorry, it was a quarter full, and then it ended up, it was half full. So I know I got water in it, and I drained the fuel out, and then put fresh fuel in it. And I knew that when you get water in the crankcase of an engine, you've got to give it a couple oil changes. So I drained out the milky oil, and then put some used oil in it, which wasn't too dirty, and then ran it for a little bit. Brought it back, drained the oil out, poured some brand new oil in it, and then that got rid of all the water. Since then, it was working good. I was driving it through the mud and whatever, and then I was in a mud puddle, and it just stalled out. So what I did was, I wasn't sure what it was, why it wouldn't start. I was cranking over a starter, didn't do anything. So I got my buddy to pull me with the a 250 ATV. Pulled me for about, I don't know, 2 kilometers almost. And then it would start, and then it would die out, and it'd start, and it would die out. And then I eventually got it going. I was able to drive it around, but then if I let it idle, it would just stall out. So then I tried pull starting it again, and it wouldn't start. So I dragged it home and ended up, it was checked spark. There was no spark. So what I thought it was I thought CDI was gone in it. So I put a new CDI in it, but that didn't solve the problem. So I put the old CDI in it, put a new stator on it, and then that fixed the problem. And after all the modifications and whatnot, runs really well now. I haven't had a problem in weeks or whatever. Actually, ever since I reinforced the whole rear end and put the new stator on it, that solved the problem. So that's it for the video. Hopefully you liked it. You can rate, comment, and subscribe. See you later.